Making time for us.
Glad to be on with you guys.
We really appreciate it. Coach, we know in the NFL it's next man up league. This offense is on pace to be one of the best ever in the NFL. Obviously, suspension 4 games for Le'Veon and then Martavis Bryant out. Who has to step up?
You know, I think we're going to be defined by our depth, and I think that's always the case. You know, sometimes adversity comes to you in different forms, whether it's suspensions or injuries or a combination of both. The emergence of young guys, the development of young guys always excites me, and I'm seeing guys taking the necessary step to help us in those areas. Guys like Sammy Coates, who's, you know, his growth and development over the last 12 months has been highly documented. But more importantly than that, we're seeing it day to day out here now as we begin the process of building our team for this year.
Coach, I'm looking at Sammy Coates. I'm looking at Mark Sweeten. I got a lot of confidence in them with Martavis Bryant being out. Even though Le'Veon Bell's not going to be there for the first 4 games in all likelihood, I'm looking at D'Angelo Williams. We know what he could do. We know what this offense could do with Big Ben, and Pouncey being there helps that offensive line. I'm looking at your defense. You and I talked about this last year. I had concerns about the defense and the passing, you know, the secondary. You drafted Burns. You got this kid. I think it's Sean Davis. I forgot his name.
Sean Davis.
That's right. I got it right. Talk to me about what you feel about your defense, because I'm really not concerned about the offense. It's your defense I'm worried about.
I'm excited about the growth and development of the defense, and those are 2 very new guys that you mentioned, and their acquisition and development is going to be critical. But it's the young guys that have been here that are continuing to grow and develop and hopefully emerge and take the next step in their careers are the real reason why we're excited. Guys like Stephon Tuitt and Ryan Shazier are no longer young developing guys. They got to be cornerstones of this unit, and from what we've seen thus far, they appear to be ready to take that step.
Bud Dupree, too. You feel the same way about Bud Dupree, right?
No question.
Okay.
Coach, when you were first announced as a Steelers head coach, and I'm like Stephen A., my first love as a team actually were the Steelers, because when I was a kid, you know, Mean Joe Green was on the Great Space Coasters, right? The Steelers won the Super Bowl every year. And I'm like, who's Mike Tom? And you get up, Steelers football, run the ball, stop the run. I said, oh, okay, I could go with this guy. This guy, I could see why players would. It must particularly gall you in terms of your hard-nosed kind of mentality and sensibility when your defense is soft, when it's given. How does a Mike Tomlin team ever get to a place, I'm really curious, where the defense is the problem?
Well, we didn't suggest that people ran on us successfully, so let's
it is a secondary. It is a secondary.
There's a certain feeling when they throw the ball over the top of you. You hate that, but nobody running through us, and that's remained the same.
Fair point.
I'll let the stats speak for themselves in that regard. So, but to your point, we do want the defense to be a strength of our football team and the reason why we've won. The makeup of our team hadn't been such over the last several years, but at the end of the day, man, we got to let egos and our vision of how we win to the side some and do what's required to get out of stadiums with W's and play to our strengths. And in recent years, offense has been our strength, and we can't hate that.
I know you hate losing. You always hate losing. You're a Super Bowl champion. You've taken the team to 2 Super Bowls as this team's coach. I know you don't like losing. But last year when y'all lost to Denver in that divisional playoff game, it seemed to hit you, when I watched you in the postgame, it seemed to hit you just a touch harder than other losses in the past have hit you. Talk to me about why it appeared to be that way.
Because I thought that group had the unique closeness required to be world champs. And forget playmaking ability and the things that you do inside a stadium. I thought that group had the unique closeness that was required for us to be world champs. They told each other the truth. They held each other accountable. We weren't perfect. We made mistakes, but we quickly acknowledged them and we moved on from them. And those characteristics that really revealed themselves over the course of the journey is what created those feelings.
Did you find yourself, and I know you're not one of those guys about ifs and could-haves and would-haves, but it had to sit up there and just pause you for a second. If Ben Roethlisberger was healthy, if he wasn't fighting through some stuff, if Antonio Brown, you know, hadn't gotten concussed by Vontaze Burfict, if he was available in that particular game, do those kind of thoughts enter your pragmatic mind, even in moments like that?
After the fact, you know, when I get a little distance away from the scenario, I can assess it in that way. I don't know that I allow myself to acknowledge those type things in the midst of it. I'm just paid to overcome issues such as the ones you mentioned, and so is our team, and we embrace the responsibility that comes with our positions in that area.
Coach, I mean, by the resume, by the record, Bill Belichick's the best coach in the NFL, maybe in history. You are one of the top coaches in the NFL, but a lot of people's favorite coach. Like, you happen to be my favorite coach. I'm a Giants fan, and when you talk to players and personnel around the league, and you mention that, they all say the players love playing for Mike Tomlin. What does that mean for you, that players love to play for you?
Man, we all know our responsibility and what we have in front of us in here on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. You know, that is what it is. It's okay. We might as well have fun while we do it. And along those same lines, I also believed in being upfront and telling them the truth. And I think those are two prongs, if you will, of my approach that I think players appreciate. We try to have as much fun as we can in the midst of the work, and we acknowledge and talk truthfully about things we need to talk about.
Coach, changing gears real quickly, a few weeks ago, I was on vacation at that time. He was about to come on the show. It was in the news. We weren't on the air, but a lot of news was being made about the Rooney Rule in the National Football League. We heard Tony Dungy even speak about it from the standpoint that the original intent of the rule wasn't something that was being exercised in this day and age. People look at you. Obviously, we're here with Pittsburgh. It's the Rooney's family, you know, top-notch, first tier of the NFL, and we know what they mean to the sport of football, and you being here, it just epitomizes and personifies everything that their goal was about in inserting and implementing that rule. What are your thoughts about what's been going on in the National Football League as it pertains to the paucity of African Americans being hired?
I'm so glad you brought it up. I mean, I have many thoughts, and I think there are many elements of this discussion that needs to be chewed on by all of us. The original intent and the spirit of the rule being one thing, not to dictate the process, but to simply slow the process down, to encourage people that want to follow the spirit of the rule to take time to get to explore worthy candidates. But to me, there are other elements of the discussion that are developing quickly that aren't being discussed as much. The utilization of search firms in the hiring process eliminates some of the transparency that makes the upkeep of the spirit of the rule easier. I'd be interested in peeling back the curtain and having open discussions about why people choose to use search firms to make hires, right, and what the process of the search firms are, and who the decision-making people within the search firm game are. There's so many elements of this discussion that needs to be had, and whenever the subject is brought up, I'm always willing to take part. I appreciate you allowing me to.
Yes, we have to go to break.
Coach,
you got to come back on, and we'll discuss it more. You're a class act. Thank you for having us, and your team always must watch. So looking forward to that this season. Best of luck. First take done here in Latrobe. Tomorrow to Richmond for Redskins camp. Stay tuned. Everybody have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you, Coach. Well, hello there. Come on in. We hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Welcome into First Take. We'll try to get your week started off right. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. in the house. I'm Molly Karam.
The exam is starting. He has to put his books away. He's got to put the cheat sheet away.
No.
He's looking clean.
No, I'm never.
Open book test.
Well, look at you with all that paperwork in front of you. You act like it's just a glass case. It's a glass desk in front of you.
You guys do your homework.
Unbelievable.
Part of the job, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Let's go, man. Let's go.
All right, let's get into it. We kick things off in Texas. Sorry, Stephen A., but the Cowboys, we begin with them. They wanted to show their support for the Dallas Police Department and the families of the officers who were shot and killed by a sniper during a protest last month. So, at the start of training camp, the Cowboys walked on the field arm in arm with Dallas Police Chief David Brown and family members of the officers who were killed. Stephen A., what was your reaction?
First of all, let me say this. We were off the air. Obviously making the transition from the old era to the new era. We were on vacation, so we didn't have an opportunity to extend our deepest condolences and express our heartfelt condolences to the family of the victims, the 5 police officers killed in Dallas. Our hearts go out to all of them. I'm speaking on behalf of the entire show here because I know everybody feels the same way. And Police Chief David Brown is absolutely sensational in terms of how he's handled this whole ordeal with the professionalism and the class he deserves. Our praise. And he has received it nationwide, and it is very, very well deserved. I also like to sit there and say that in no way am I about to imply that the Dallas Cowboys were insincere in any way in terms of, you know, their heartfelt emotions in regard to that matter. If you've got a pulse, you've got blood circulating through your veins, obviously your heart goes out to all the family members of the victims, the loved ones are left behind, etc. I am in no way trying to imply that the Dallas Cowboys are not sensitive to that they don't care, that what we saw from them yesterday as it pertains to locking arms with Police Chief David Brown and other police officers, that they were not sincere. My problem with the Dallas Cowboys is that we live in a world where we constantly talk about guys being role models, and I'm very serious here. Yes, I'm a Dallas Cowboy hater, but that's all in fun because I'm a native New Yorker, and obviously I like to root against the Dallas Cowboys. In this particular situation, I'm incredibly serious because I had our researcher extraordinaire, David Sabino, pull up a couple of situations involving the Dallas Cowboys. This is a list.
That's a long list.
There's a list of the Dallas Cowboys that have gotten in trouble over the last few years. I mean, it's everything here from NFL substance abuse to obviously bringing Greg Hardy on board, to arrest for brandishing weapons, to arrest for public intoxication, to arrest for family violence, to arrest with somebody charged with intoxication, manslaughter, to arrest involving DUI, to arrest involving shoplifting, to arrest involving marijuana possession charges. I mean, the list goes on. And I'm not going to sit up there and cast aspersions on those particular individuals on this particular day because I'm not joking. It's nothing to laugh about, and I'm being very serious. I'm saying that if you are America's team, if you are the team with the star on your helmet, playing in that billion-dollar playpen, et cetera, I don't blame you one bit for doing what you did yesterday in terms of locking arms, taking the picture. Obviously, what happened was in Dallas, so we understand the correlation there. But it just got me to thinking that, you know what, clearly while you don't wish this on anybody, and you know that the Dallas Cowboys as an organization, as individual players, and beyond as a fan base, nobody wishes anything like this to happen. Not if you got any kind of decency within yourself. It just took me back a second and said, you know what? If you have so much respect for the law, why don't you try obeying it as an organization? Why don't you try milking headlines for what you do on the football field instead of the transgressions that continuously happen off the field? That's the kind of thing that resonated with me, Max. It resonated with me profoundly, and it was the first thing that jumped on my mind. I got more to say, but go ahead.
Dallas Cowboys should do better off the field. We all should. I mean, no one's perfect. And I get it. There's a special level, or was it a pouch, in Dante's Inferno for the hypocrites. I understand you're behaving one way, you're saying something else, right. But I'm reminded of what the president said at the Dallas Memorial for those police officers when he told the story about that mother who took her 4 sons to the protest because she was worried about their safety given what was going on with the police and young African-American men in this country. Mm-hmm. And they're the police keeping the peace and allowing them to peacefully, ensuring that they can peacefully protest when this maniac opened fire.
Right.
And due to the heroism of the police in Dallas, mm-hmm. It wasn't much worse than it already was.
That's right.
And the most moving part of the story, as the president was speaking at the memorial, was that the 12-year-old, I think he was, son, one of the 4 sons that the mother brought there, now wants to be a cop mm-hmm. based on what he saw. And that was out of that tragedy was born this kind of uplifting, unifying, supportive theme. Mm-hmm. I think if the Cowboys, I understand that some of their behavior off the field, or maybe even disproportionate to the rest of the NFL, if you want to make that argument, is not good. But if there is a kind of larger humanitarian issue and a prison full of, people who've broken the law want to come together to show solidarity on that humanitarian issue, I'm all for it. Right. Let alone the Dallas Cowboys, who are a big, organization. I understand that a lot of them are millionaires. They make a lot of money. This is always the argument with superstar or professional athletes. They have all this money, and many of them went to college. Why aren't they doing better? But it's still, 75 people on a football team. You include the practice squad and everything. It's a lot of people, a lot of them from impoverished backgrounds, etc. Mm-hmm. I understand we'd like everyone to do better, but I think in this case, I am all for anyone who wants to show solidarity and support to the Dallas Police Department.
And in no way do I disagree with that point. I stand with you in unison in regards to that. I want to make that very, very clear. But what I'm talking about is what hits the mind's eye the second you see that. See, for example, I don't think the Dallas Cowboys were hypocritical. I think that the Dallas Cowboys were incredibly sincere. How can you not be? But are you telling me that the Dallas Cowboys, based on who they are, who they've been on the field and off the field, how they seem just as hell-bent on stealing headlines as they are in trying to win? Because we can't certainly say not winning, because they haven't done much of that over the last 20 years. In trying to win, you have such a zest for headlines. Are you trying to tell me that the critic out there doesn't look at you and question the legitimacy of your authenticity in terms of being so supportive? Now, again, those are people that are subhuman as far as I'm concerned, because you've got to believe, if you've got any kind of spirit inside you, okay, that they are clearly very, very sincere. And I'm certainly not challenging that. But what I'm saying is, when one transgression after another continuously takes place with the same organization, and you seem averse to the effects of it because you're stealing headlines because of it, the cynic out there, not Stephen A, as much of a cynic as I am of the Cowboys, but the abnormal cynic out there, the ultra uber cynic out there, is going to look at you and they're going to say, how authentic were you in all of this? Because you could have done what you did without gaining publicity for it. There was a way to do it without everybody having to see it, but you wanted to make sure that you sent that message. Yet we have a track record here which you associated with transgressions, not violent ones. Let's be clear about that. Not violent ones, but nevertheless transgressions. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Some of them. I'm sorry. Greg Hardy was on the Panthers before the Cowboys. That's why I didn't bring that up. But here's the deal. And this is why it's so important. This is where it resonates with me, perhaps differently than you, Max, perhaps differently than you, Molly. When you think about some of the things that emanated, or some of the things that led up to the Dallas shooting, Black Lives Matter and police brutality and the things that were taking place, the protests and unarmed black citizens getting gunned down by police officers, et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of things that we've talked about all over the airwaves, on the news or what have you, well, what's the common denominator here? You're talking about black men. And so when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, those who have been transgressing, okay, the fact of the matter is it ain't the white dudes doing it on the Dallas Cowboys. And so when you have that going on and you look at that reality, again, I'm saying to you that I would hope that a moment like this elevated the level of priority in their mind. We need to fly straight and do right and make sure that we don't just practice this when a police officer in front of us who's a hero in our eyes based on how he handled everything in the aftermath of those shootings. We want to sit up there and extend this far beyond that particular day when we're locking arm in arm with police officers and bringing attention to violence on both sides, violence against police officers, violence on behalf of a few police officers. We want to make sure we bring attention to that. But I'm saying in the case of the Dallas Cowboys, it needs to extend further than that because they're the Dallas Cowboys. And you need to convince us that you're not just looking to make headlines all the damn time. That's what I'm saying.
If you're right about the cynics looking at the Cowboys and seeing it as something like a publicity, not stunt, but some way to get them some good press, then you're right in that. If you're right about those cynics, then the Cowboys are kind of in a no-win situation. Right. Because what are they supposed to do? Not show public support and be criticized for that, or show some public support and some real hardcore cynics would feel cynical about it? It does point out in that case that if that's the case, then the reason they'd be in a no-win situation is because they haven't done better already. And it does highlight I don't know if it's the necessity, but the benefit of flying straight for some of these guys who have not done so well in the past in terms of their behavior off the field.
I root for the Dallas Cowboys to lose on the football field. I do not root for any of them to lose in life. I want all of those guys to succeed. I want them to be safe. I want them to make sure that they avoid the kind of mistakes that they've obviously found themselves in on far too many occasions. Now, maybe, just maybe, it's being unfair to the Dallas Cowboys because they're in the news more than a typical organization, and if it was somebody else, we would not have heard as much about it. That's not the impression I get. The impression that I get is that you're the Dallas Cowboys. It's almost like you have this unwritten mantra, just win, baby. Like I said before, The problem is they rarely win. Over the last 20 years, they've got about 2 playoff victories. They've been a walking piece of mediocrity. They've been in the news far more for their transgressions than they have been for anything productive on the football field. And I'm saying that needs to stop, particularly when you find yourself in a situation like this.
You got to give it to Jerry Jones. Speaking of that subject, getting a little bit off the kind of social component of it and onto the field, you got to give it to Jerry Jones. The #1 brand in American sports is the Dallas Cowboys. Think about that. Ahead of the New York Yankees, ahead of the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm talking about heritage franchises that have won by far the most championships in their sports. In the Lakers' case, in the modern era. The Celtics had the most overall. Most of them were kind of BC. But in the modern era, and they're in the 2 biggest, most expensive markets. Then you look at the Cowboys. They simply do not have the same history of the Yankees or the Lakers. They are in an area where the real estate is not nearly as expensive as New York or Los Angeles. I mean, it's just not in Dallas. It's pennies on the dollar. And a lot of these, the valuation of franchises we know are real estate holdings and stuff. You have to give it to Jerry Jones. Everything you said is true. They have almost no playoff wins in decades. They have 2 in over a decade, 2 playoff wins, and yet they remain the most valuable franchise in American team sports. That's amazing.
Well, listen, I know others would like to give Jerry Jones credit. The person I'm going to give credit to are the Tex Schrams of the world.
Yeah, I agree.
The Tom Landrys of the world.
But he kept it going in terms of the value.
He did keep it going when they, they traded away Herschel Walker for a boatload of players. Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones got 3 Super Bowl rings, drafted Michael Irvin, drafted Troy Aikman, drafted Emmitt Smith. We get all of that, and he deserves credit for what they did in the 90s. But prior to that, there was a tradition, a history, and a fan base that was indelibly etched in the American psyche, which is that of the Dallas Cowboys. Because you played on Thanksgiving Day, with Tex Schramm pushing for that. Because you had the star on your helmet. Because you were Tom Landry with the shotgun offense and all of this other stuff. The Dallas Cowboys were and have been since a damn near addiction. We get all of that, and Jerry Jones deserves credit.
But if Jerry Jones
built off of that,
if there's no Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switz, really more Jimmy Johnson era, if that didn't happen, then we're not thinking about them the same way, because eventually through attrition, you start to lose the luster. And you think about the Deion Sanders move, where Jerry Jones is pushing for the salary cap. He's spearheading the hard cap, and he gets it through, and the day he gets it through, they signed Deion Sanders, and everyone's like, well, how did you can't? You're the one who said, and he's like, well, we're prorating the bonus. I mean, he was kind of a leader in terms of the business and suppressing the labor costs on the one hand, and on the other, making sure that the Cowboys stayed relevant by getting the piece that would ensure another championship.
That's true, but that doesn't negate the reality that based off of everything that you just said, it just augments and elevates the point that when you think Jerry Jones and football, you think P.T. Barnum and Bailey. Circus. That's what you think, because winning has not been their M.O. Making headlines has been their M.O. And as great as it was to make this particular headline, in the end, here's what it comes down to. It's a headline for something other than what you did on the football field, which has worked successfully for them from a marketing perspective, but not much in the way of winning football games. And at some point in time, not only can they be held accountable for that in terms of their lack of production on the football field, we also need to hold them accountable, because if you're going to lock on with the police officers, and we all know where there's smoke, there's fire. So with all the transgressions that we hear about with the Dallas Cowboys, you know good and damn well there's more, but you have, connections with the police and beyond. At the end of the day, if you're going to lock arms with them, make sure that you go out there and you conduct yourself in a professional and upstanding fashion, so we're not looking at you and thinking that you're just trying to get headlines.
Just so for clarity's sake here, use this moment as a kind of springboard to do better.
Exactly.
Got it. And as you guys alluded to, 20 seasons since the Cowboys have won more than a playoff game. That was 1995. Darren Woodson on that championship team. He will join us a little later in the show. And when we come back, we're actually going to stay in the NFC East. Josh Norman chose to leave the Panthers and go get paid by Washington. But is he getting exposed in practice by his new teammate? We'll show you, and we'll explain next.
Fair.
Yeah?
You're talking about one-on-ones. The one-on-one is structured for the quarterback and wide receiver to win all the time. No pass rush. Quarterback just sits there and pats the ball. The wide receiver runs his route exactly how he wants to run. There's no pressure involved on the quarterback side. we used to get beat like this all the time as a defensive back. I don't care who you are. In one-on-ones, it's set up for the wide receivers to win, and that's totally unfair.
Yeah, one-on-ones, like in the NFL, when Norman's on Odell Beckham, it's set up for the wide receiver to win.
No, that's
Beckham
totally different.
Burnt him all day.
Yeah, but
dropped a couple passes, but
thank you.
Okay,
that doesn't mean.
Okay,
when you
but it's not because Norman was in the. Where was Norman?
That's not getting burned when he dropped the pass.
Where was Norman?
Doesn't matter. Did he drop the ball?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying to you. With pressure, it's a totally different game. And we saw Josh Norman. Listen, am I saying Josh Norman is the elite of the elite, like Richard Sherman? No.
That's what we want to know. Is he worth this money?
I think he's worth the money. If someone's willing to pay it, yes, you are worth the money.
But you're
Simple
saying
as that.
He's not elite.
No.
Like
But if you were a GM and you had to price talent, is he worth being the highest paid corner in the NFL?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if I am a team like the Washington Redskins and I feel like I need a corner, listen, cornerbacks are just like quarterbacks, are just like left tackles. They don't walk around and they don't grow on trees. Right. You have to find a guy that can willingly go 50-50 on the outside and match up with Dez Bryant, Odell Beckham, whoever it is.
They still got to find that guy.
And that's, well, I feel like the Washington Redskins make that decision that said they saw what he did against Odell Beckham, which he played okay. I mean, it wasn't great, but when they saw what he did with Dez Bryant, and he shut Dez out for 4 quarters. So that's what you want, and that's what a lot of teams do. They see a guy in a different division or a different conference, and they say, this is how he matched up with certain guys. We want him on this team, and is he worth the $15 million? Yes, he's worth the $15 million to the Washington Redskins.
I don't like this.
Why?
I actually agree with Darren. He's not wrong. Here's the deal, Max. First of all, Josh Norman can play. That's number one. Secondly, Odell Beckham Jr., there's no shame in losing to him. This brother's on another level. We understand he dropped one pass. We understand that there was a couple of times he got open. We understand that he lost his head a little bit, and had that not been the case, it would have been one of those situations where essentially what it would have come down to is that Odell Beckham Jr. may have ended up getting the better of Josh Norman even more so than he actually did. I get all of that. But here's the bottom line. When you look at it, pay attention to what's transpiring. You got Joe Barry and his zone schemes. You've got the fact that Josh Norman is a system player. Now, if you hired him to be a shutdown corner a la Deion Sanders, of course there's a problem. Where I agree with Darren, where we're being unfair to Josh Norman, even though Josh Norman is capable of covering, the reality is that when you looked at Carolina's defense, there was some zone going on. He was assisted. You had the crew, Kuechly and Thomas and the boys. You know, he wasn't alone. In Washington, they gave him that money not just because of his talent, his name, his cachet, and the fact that they needed to buffer their secondary, but also because they knew that they're going to be playing zone schemes. They're going to be employing that. So what you did was grab a guy that you knew you would need, because Breland being back there by himself, or with an aging D'Angelo Hall who could still play, you needed some assistance. You needed a name. You drafted some kid in the 3rd round to play corner, where you were ultimately able to get rid of Culliver and unload him. So they buffered their secondary because that's a problem. Then you look at Kerrigan and the crew, and you look at this rookie, Preston Smith, who led all rookies with 8 sacks last year. If you're capable of getting to the passer more and you're playing zone, then obviously, like Darren is alluding to, you're going to have a limited amount of time to get at the quarterback. Therefore, you got Josh Norman, who's going to look even better because of that, not to mention the fact that he's going to have help. It's not some kind of matchup with him against Odell Beckham Jr., because if we're being real about it, is there anybody that you know of in the NFL? I don't care whether it's Patrick Patterson, that is a bad boy, whether it's Richard Sherman, or my man Joe Hayden in Cleveland, who don't get enough love, but he gonna get it here because Joe Hayden's a bad boy. Okay, so let's be real. Can anyone up here definitively, you know your football too, Molly, can anybody sit here right now and say that anybody in the NFL can guard Odell Beckham Jr. by themselves?
No.
One-on-one?
No.
Well, then what's the problem?
Here's the problem. Well, first of all, let me start by saying Josh Norman's a good player. I thought he was a crazy great player, like top 3 defensive player for a while, and then I saw certain things that had me back off that and say, no, this is a zone corner. And don't forget, Washington's the kind of place like Champ Bailey, when they traded Clinton Portis when running backs still had a lot of value, and Portis was like, I mean, he was just a flash. You couldn't even see. They traded Portis in his prime for Champ Bailey. They value shutdown corners at a point when Champ Bailey was the best corner in the game. That's not what they're getting here. They're not getting a shutdown corner here. Now, I'll even give him some credit as even not to try and just win the argument, that he's more mature than Odell. And the fact that Odell had never dropped a pass where he was targeted and just drops the pass in his career, and he dropped 2 that day, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that Norman applied enough psychological, at least, pressure to Odell that it rattled him. And you even hear Odell's comments since then. Odell's still fixated on this dude, and Norman's like, yo, why are you still talking about me? And Odell's the much more famous player and considered even better at his position. I'm not going to argue that. And I also understand if you're going to run zone and different things, he's a very useful player, Josh Norman. I get that. This is my issue. The NFL is a hard cap league. In a hard cap league, the job of a GM before anything else is to properly price commodities. In this case, players. You better be able to put the prices right. You better be able to price that properly, because every dollar you overpay for one guy is a dollar you can't pay for another guy. Now I ask you this. Is Josh Norman worth a $50 million guarantee?
Go ahead, Darren.
Hey, you know what? If the Washington Redskins are willing to pay what they paid him, whatever it is. But listen,
I'm not saying that's not his market value. I'm saying should they have?
I think they
did they properly price him?
Look,
come on.
I do. I absolutely do. Now listen, I haven't always been a Josh Norman fan. Have not. And it took me until last year to watch from week 6 on to see what kind of player he is. This is what you're getting in Josh Norman. Are you getting a shutdown, follow you around corner? No, you're not getting Patrick Peterson. You're not getting Richard Sherman or maybe Darrelle Revis, but what you are getting is a guy with tremendous confidence, a guy that you feed off of. I've played with players that were half as talented as Josh Norman, but they had tremendous confidence, and you feed off of it as a unit. And I thought when you watch Carolina play, Josh Norman was in a huddle, and he saw whoever broke the huddle, Larry Fitzgerald went that way, there went Josh Norman. He's in your face. That's what you want to see in your player. A smart football player that's greedy and wants it.
Here's the deal, y'all. Look at this list here, these dollars. Josh Norman's at number 1, $50 million guaranteed. Patrick Peterson's number 2, $48 million.
I get that.
Joe Hayden, $45 million, number 3. Richard Sherman, $40 million, number 4. Darrelle Revis, number 5, at $39 million. Janoris Jenkins, number 6, $28.8 million. You can make a legitimate argument that there are about 4 corners in the NFL that may be better than Josh Norman.
Absolutely.
Straight up.
Yep.
That's no disrespect to Josh Norman, all right? But let me also take into account, not only are you paying for production, but you also pay for potential, which is something that we try to gloss over, but that's a reality. Josh Norman is 28. Josh Norman is not only 28, but this dude was from some nondescript school in Carolina, Coastal Carolina, if I remember correctly, okay? Worked his way up, worked his way through the practice squad and beyond. He didn't even want to leave Carolina. He just wanted what he thought his worth was, and he wanted them to break the bank for him. Fair enough. What I'm saying to you is that when you are 28 years of age and you went through the terrain that he went through, wasn't the first-round pick, wasn't the 7th-round pick, okay? He went, and you work your way onto a National Football League team and get to a point where you establish yourself from being some nondescript dude on a practice squad to being one of the elite corners in the game, because just because you might not be top 4 don't make you elite.
That's right.
When you combine that with the fact that the need for the team that you went to is similar to the system you played in Carolina. You combine that with the fact that you went from Carolina in the NFC South to the NFC East, where only one team was over 500 and everybody else stuck up the joint and wet the bed. I'm sorry. That justifies the dollars.
Well,
that justifies the dollars.
He got his money.
I know that. I know that, but I'm saying it justifies it. I'm saying it justifies it if you're the Redskins.
Look, I get it. Also, he's the next man up, and this is how it works. Whoever the latest really good player is resets the market.
That's right.
That's generally how it works. I just think if you're going to guarantee the most dollars in the NFL at the position to a corner, that guy should be a shutdown corner. There aren't that many of them, I get it, but I don't think that's Norman.
Well, I'm saying you don't think that's Norman, but my problem is this. Let's look at the Redskins. Let's look at the fact that they're 9-7. Let's look at the fact that they franchise tagged their quarterback at $19.9 million. Let's look at the fact that they were the lone team over 500, that they've been a playoff, that they are a playoff team. Now, they haven't made back-to-back playoff spots since 96, 97, okay? And they haven't, and Lord knows,
they ain't going to do it this time either.
Well, they may not, but we don't know that. We don't know that. Questions about the Giants' defense, no matter how much money they spent. Questions about the Eagles all over. Question about the health and the psyche of your Dallas Cowboys. But they're not knuckleheads, but their actions are indicative of knuckleheadedness. Okay? So you got all of that going on. It's just the truth, Darren. It's just the truth. So I'm just saying, if you look at Washington, you go out, you get Norman. You draft another corner in the 3rd round. You still got Breland, who is elevating, okay? You still got D'Angelo Hall, who is experienced. You got the Ryan Kerrigan. You got a rookie that's got 8 sacks on his docket, backing up Kerrigan. You've got a team with a potential pass rush. Now, they give up too many yards rushing.